Welcome to One on One. I'm Greg Bassey, your host from the Salisbury Independent newspaper, and today we have Andrea Berstler with us. And if you don't know Andrea, you need to know her because she is in charge of our Wycomico County library system, and she, I think, is one of the most dynamic people I have encountered in the last year. Welcome, Andrea.
Hello, Greg. I'm kind of speechless. I've never had such a great introduction.
Well,
Thank
the
you.
library is this sleepy thing, and no one's really done what to do with the library for a while, and the library just sort of goes on. But you've changed this thing. You've made the library part of everything that we do. People talk about the library now. So you might not realize that because you've made it happen. Maybe you think it always happened, but it wasn't like this. The library, more than ever, is the focus of what's going on in our community.
And really, that's a lot of the ways that libraries should be. I tell people, they say about the sleepy library, the quiet library, people walking around going shh. But really what libraries have always been about is information. We've been about trying to make sure that as many people as possible have access to as much information as possible, based on the precept that an educated community makes good decisions. So it's just that the information has changed now. It's not in books. It's on a computer, it's
right.
online. And so with that, we changed the physical library. We have maybe a few less books, we have a few more computers, but we also make space where people can exchange ideas, just like we're doing here now with a conversation.
Right.
So you have ideas, I have ideas, maybe someone else has another idea. And so we're trying to make space where that they can sit down in the library and they can have conversations about that, about where is the community going, what does the community need, how can we make things better.
Right. Now, when you ride through downtown Salisbury and you see the great community institutions all lined up, First Shore Federal Bank, then you had the firehouse across the street, the library, and then the newspaper was up on the corner, and the hospital. All that stuff that makes small town America, made the community great, we're right there. And all those things have changed so much. The transition at the hospital, the newspaper's gone now. The firehouse is a restaurant, music pavilion. And you think, well, the library is the same, but it's not. It's had to change too.
It has had to change. And I've been very fortunate when I came down here almost 4 years ago now. The staff was ready. They wanted the change. They had lots of good ideas. And so it was a matter of just taking all the ideas, sort of putting them on the table and saying, all right, what is it? You all know the community. My skill set was administration, running things. Let's see if we can work together and create the library the community really wanted.
Right.
And so over the last couple of years, we've done a whole new strategic plan. We've done what we could with the old building. Not getting the new library was a disappointment.
Right.
The staff was really let down about that. But the economy is what the economy is, and they understand that. So we challenged them to build the new library in the old building.
Right.
And that is what they have done. They have taken all those great ideas they had for the new building and they've implemented them in the old building. And so we've sort of, that's our motto, is we've created a new library in an old building.
Right.
And it's real exciting. There's no shushing except in one space. Things are always on the go. We always have something new happening. Last week we had a course on how to brew your own beer. The week before that we had a cooking class. We've got Lego classes, robotics classes.
And if anyone doesn't get your newsletter, they should. Right?
Absolutely.
You can see it online. It's amazing, the stuff that you all have scheduled. And little workshops and training things.
Absolutely.
Just amazing how to use social media and stuff. I mean, there's always something to do at the library. That's
our goal, is that we have a wide range of interests in this community, and so our goal was to try and touch on all of them.
Right.
The other night we had a music concert from the local group, the WW Tunes, who do the 1940s music.
Right.
And it was a hoot. It was
right.
It was great. We had a full house. But the idea is to reach into the community and say, what is it you really want out of your library? And libraries across the country are having to do this. And every one of them chooses something a little different because every community is different.
Right.
Some of them become genealogy hubs where that people can go and do family research and local history. We're very fortunate. We have the NAB Center. So that was something we didn't have to do. We we encourage people to go there. They're
Right.
experts. But those family-oriented things, we want to do something with our family. We want to go out together, or places where businesses and community organizations can meet. That was a need. And
Right.
so that's the need we're trying to fill.
No, I grew up in that library. I went every day after school, pretty much. I loved it there. And there was a librarian. The children's librarian was Mrs. White, and I don't know her first name, but she would give me a book to read, and I'd go away for 3 weeks, and I'd bring it back, and she'd say, "Now you're going to read this book." And like she kind of programmed me. She knew what I liked and what I wanted to read and what I needed to read, and I enjoyed everything that she gave me. So I never pushed back. But that was somebody who somehow changed my life like a teacher would or a mentor, and it was a librarian.
Absolutely. And our librarians are still doing that. We're reaching into homes where the parents are working 2 or 3 jobs, and the kids come to the library, and we're helping to guide them into their reading, their reading choices, giving them things that are interesting, but a little challenging maybe,
Right.
or are entertaining, that help them to just get a few hours where that they can relax.
Right.
And so yes, we have I have 5 people who work in our children's library downtown, and a couple more who work out at the branches, and they're very aware of how important it is for kids to find things that they can engage with in a book,
Right.
whether it's a virtual book online or a physical book from the library, and it really can change your life.
Now, Wycomico is unique. You look at Worcester County, and there's a public library in all the towns: Pocomoke, Snow Hill, Berlin, Ocean Pines, Ocean City. In Wycomico, there's the big library downtown, and there's a library in Pittsville, and you have a place up at the mall.
Right.
But the bookmobile has sort of taken the place of a branch. So to get to Sharptown, Mardella, Hebron, the bookmobile is sort of the horse for that. Talk about the importance of the bookmobile.
The bookmobile is just so cool. We are the last bookmobile on Maryland's Eastern Shore.
I did not know that.
Delaware has a couple, but
Yeah.
it is, if you haven't seen it, I don't know what rock you've been under, because it's huge. It's the
Right.
size of a bus.
Right.
We take it to all kinds of community things. We put it in parades. It's our traveling billboard.
I love it.
It's great. But you're right, it does. It goes to a lot of the Title I schools and helps supplement the Title I libraries.
Right.
It goes to daycares. It goes to adult centers. We stop over at PRMC. They have a child care center over there. And they have community stops as well. And the idea is that we can bring at least this part of our library service to those communities. In the long term, down the road, years from now, we would really like to have branches in some of those communities. We'd
Right.
love to have a branch in Hebron and in Fruitland, where these hubs have built their own communities and they have their own personality.
Right.
Kind of like we've done in Pittsville, where we've put a branch. But for now, the bookmobile will serve, and it really is the horse. They do the heavy lifting. They account for upwards of almost 15% of everything we loan goes through that little bus. Less than 500 square feet.
Right.
And the ladies who work on it are wonderful. They're rock stars. The kids love them. The teachers love them. And I don't see any end to the bookmobile service in any time. People have come and said, please don't get rid of the bookmobile. Not going to happen.
Yeah.
They're just so successful.
A couple years ago, we were on a family vacation, and in the car on the way back, my son remembered that he had a book report due the next day, his first day back at school. And it was a biography thing. And it was like, oh my gosh, the library's closed. What are we going to do? Why would you not think of this? And then I was like, wait a minute, the bookmobile will be in Quantico this afternoon. So we actually stopped on our way home. And he found a biography of Elvis Presley, who he'd never heard of.
Oh my.
Yeah, and I was horrified that this would be who he would, of all the great Americans, Elvis Presley, but he produced a great thing. But the bookmobile was our save that day. It really was.
Great. That's so great to hear. I love these kind of stories.
I mean, it was just terrific that it was out there and it was available.
Yep. We're really pleased now. Last year we were able to open the downtown library back up on Sundays, which was a really big
That
boost.
was embarrassing that it was closed.
You
I mean,
know.
you need to have that weekend access.
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah, the kids need to get their reports done. For a lot of families, what we heard was that was our family library day.
Right.
It was the only day they had downtime. They could come over in the afternoon and they could leisurely spend time in the library.
Right.
So that became a real priority. What we're going to try for next, we'd like to get the evening hours back. We have 2 nights a week
Right.
that we're open late, and 2 nights a week that
What
we're
nights are
closed
those?
early. Tuesdays and Thursdays we're
Okay.
open late downtown. The mall branch is open more evening hours, but they don't have all of the research information. They
Right.
really are just a reading library and a tech library. They do a lot of computer classes. So what we're going to hope for is that we can convince the county council and the county executive to give us enough funding to open up Monday nights and Wednesday nights as well. So we'll have 4 nights a week, which will really help people who work, as well as our weekends. Then that's kind of the next thing.
Now, I understand our county is pretty good at in terms of having people access the library just by the number of library cards that you all give out. The percentage is 45%.
Over 45%, just over 45% of our population holds current library cards.
That's amazing.
It really is. It's incredible. We go through them, and if you don't use your library card in 3 years, you're not current anymore. So you figure that means in the last 3 years, at least 45% of the population has come into the library and used it. We have an initiative out this year called Connect Ed. It's a national initiative, and we're working with Wacomico Public Schools to get a library card in the hands of every student in the school district before the end of the year.
Wow.
That'll raise that percentage, but it'll also make the online databases that we offer that are different than the schools accessible to the school students, and that's really the heart of the drive.
Right. Now you sort of bring a business mentality to what you're doing at the library. Talk about that. How you think in a business mode.
I was originally a business major way back when I was an undergrad, and I moved into education, and then through a whole series of things I wound up working in a library and getting my master's degree. But that business training stayed with me, and as I worked in the nonprofit world, I realized that going at a nonprofit just strictly by saying, well, we're nonprofit and we do really good things and you should give us money is kind of a poor model. But if I could show them, look at how we're impacting our community. Look at the things that we're doing that are bringing dollars to the community, they're bringing benefit to the community, sort of the bottom line numbers. People began to understand a real value, an intrinsic value to the organization beyond the fact that they were doing good. So I started with that, and over the last couple of years have really worked to take all of those really solid business practices and put them in my nonprofit. And I think it's working. I think people can relate. If I go in and say, we're the library, we read to kids, we're really good, that's nice. But if I can go in and say, do you know that over 45% of the population has library cards, and that the library brings over $24 million of economic impact to this community every year, then people sit up and take notice, because it shows that we're really a positive influence. We're not just taking money from the county, we're bringing a whole lot more to it. And what that does is it adds a real value to the library and to any nonprofit. And I've seen other nonprofits in the community doing it as well, and I think it's a good model.
Right. Now, you just did a nice Q&A in our paper, the Salisbury Independent. And one of the things you talked about was the Philadelphia Library's effect on the downtown, and you compared that to the effect of your library on the downtown. Talk about that a little bit, about how it does bring money into that part of town.
It does. Philadelphia Free Library, which is, of course, one of the largest library systems in the country, did a study with the Fells Institute, which is part of the University of Pennsylvania, on the economic impact of the library in the community. And one of the really interesting pieces they found amongst the databases and the workshops that they provide and how much the books would cost if you had to go out and buy them was this impact on property taxes. What they found was that libraries have a positive impact on this. Homes within a quarter mile of a branch of the library had about a 7.5% increase in their value over similar homes that were outside of that circle. So that came out to an average of about $9,300, $9,500 per home in additional value. Now in a city the size of Philadelphia, with all of its branches and all the homes that are located near those branches, that came out to over $18 million in additional taxes the city collected because those homes were close to a library. Now our library downtown has very few residential communities, within that quarter mile. There's some, but it's not as population dense as Philadelphia. But I think the businesses that are downtown and those other organizations that are downtown also gain a benefit. It'd be interesting to study that. We have a foot traffic of over 500 people a day in the downtown library. And I think any business would be happy to be near someplace that was driving that kind of foot traffic on a daily basis.
Right. And because businesses are surround you so much, you've become you have a business center in there now. Tell me about that.
We do. We have an entrepreneur center. We're working with startup businesses and small local businesses. We're still developing some of the services for it because we didn't want to just say this is what it was going to be. We wanted to go out in the community and say, what is it you need from us?
Right.
What is keeping you up at night? What is your business struggling with? How can we help you? And so it's going a little slower than we might have originally liked, but we're doing workshops. We're doing some QuickBook classes with Maryland Capital Enterprises.
Right.
And we're working on getting a copier printer set up so that people can come in and do business proposals.
It's a great place to work.
You
because,
know, it is. It's nice and
Before I had my office, I could either go to Starbucks, or like kind of beg my way into the chamber. But the library is the place to go.
Absolutely. We have Wi-Fi, internet access for free. And when the business center gets up and running the way we want it to, there'll be some coffee down there, and
Right.
it'll really be a nice work environment. And it's really going to be focused on the business part of it. So we're hoping that the businesses contact us, especially small businesses who may be working out of their homes or out of their garages, who say, I'd really like to get out of the house a little bit.
Right.
That's what it's there for.
And there's a vibe there. There's a vibe in the library. I know when I was starting my thing, the Berlin Library was one of the places I used to like to go and hide because I could hear all the town gossip in there. It's like going to the barbershop. Plus, it was just a great work environment. The light was good and everything was good. And I know that there's the same kind of vibe at the downtown Salisbury branch.
Yeah, it is. It really is. We have a great time. And I attribute a lot of that to my staff. I have a phenomenal staff who is they are so dedicated to what they're doing. They really enjoy it. They enjoy working with the people. They enjoy helping people accomplish whatever it is they want to accomplish.
Right. And it's funny because I've seen that transition as well. In the children's library, I always felt like I had great access. But then when I got to be about 15 and I wanted to do some work in the Wacomico room, oh no, we don't let anybody in there. So you couldn't access things, or the Maryland room. You couldn't access things that you wanted to see because there was like, oh no, that's our stuff. That was the attitude. I don't think it was probably that way, but that was how it
This is
felt.
the impression you got.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I didn't feel like I was wanted there at the library. But now it does feel inclusive. There's a whole different
and that's the
attitude.
idea is this is their library. We're stewards of it. We're trying to protect it. We're trying to maintain it, and we're trying to build it forward for what it is the community wants. But in the end, it's not ours, it's theirs.
Right.
And so we've been working very hard on trying to get rid of the old stereotypical hands-off. We took a lot of our genealogy collection and we gave it to the NAB Center in exchange for access to the NAB Center by our patrons. So if you show your card,
Right.
you should be able to get in. We're building the Homework Center. I had talked a little about that. We're trying to set up a time for kids to come in after school and be able to just work in the library. Now we know this is not going to be a quiet endeavor.
Right.
Children do not sit quietly at tables and work. This is not their, but that's okay. We want them to come in. We want them to feel welcome. We want them to have those great memories that you have of the library as being a place that supports them as they try and accomplish something.
Yeah, I just love the library so much. I now, you're someone who has moved here in the last 5 years to
Yes.
Salisbury, and you have that sort of not a come here mentality. It's not like that, but you see things and ask why.
I do.
And you have lots of ideas about stuff, and you actually live downtown.
I do, yes.
So when you have all these ideas, I know why things are the way they are, but you don't, and I'm just fascinated by that. So what's your impression of our community?
It's really interesting. We moved down here and we really like it. We just felt very at home almost right away. People were very welcoming, and in fact your predecessor Phil Tillman had me on this show about
Right.
2 months after I was here. It was like, oh, you're the new librarian, I got to get you on the show. But he was very welcoming, and we appreciated that, because the further up to the northeast you get, the more difficult that gets to be.
Right.
But one of the things I noticed really early on was that there didn't seem to be a whole identity for what Salisbury was.
Right.
My family's from the Philadelphia area, and the Philadelphia area has an identity. I mean, all you have to do is say Philadelphia sports fan, and you've got an identity. This is the same for Boston, and the same for some of the larger cities. Salisbury doesn't seem to have that rallying point yet.
Right.
I think it's working on it. And I think there's some really good ideas about what it could be. The arts community is coming forward, and the music performance committee is coming forward.
Right.
And those kind of communities can really help establish an identity. But even a small town like Ocean City, they had theirs kind of handed to them. You know, we're the beach.
Right.
I think that's what Salisbury is struggling with.
Well, Salisbury's identity to me growing up, because I grew up in Salisbury and Ocean City, but Salisbury was shopping. So if you wanted to buy anything nice, you had to go to Salisbury. The nice grocery store was in Salisbury. The mall was in Salisbury. The movie theaters were in Salisbury. But then all the communities got all that stuff. There were grocery stores in Ocean City, and there were theaters in Ocean City, so we didn't have to go to Salisbury for everything. So Salisbury, I think, needed to change what it was. And if you go back before that, Salisbury is where the farmers took their grain and took their livestock. I mean, that was what Salisbury was. But it needed to change its identity somewhere in there when that retail thing changed. And it never happened.
It didn't happen, no. In fact, as a small child, we drove through Salisbury. My dad was stationed in Virginia Beach at the Norfolk Naval Station.
You're a Navy brat.
And I am a Navy brat. and we would drive across the Bay Bridge right after it was built, and we would drive up 13 to go to Philadelphia to visit family for the weekend. And there was Salisbury. I mean, my parents remember driving through Salisbury, but that was sort of it.
Right.
And I think you're right. I think that we had it, and then it kind of got lost. And I think it's coming back. But I think that will really help establish an awful lot of what else happens.
Right.
You know, if it's the arts and performance community, which is very cool, and there's a lot of cities that have kind of put their flag in that type of community. We could do a lot with it, and we've got the river, and that's kind of neat. We live right off the river. We just love it.
Right.
But there needs to be a central point that the community says, this is kind of how we're going to hang our hat. This is who we're going to be.
Right. You hear about kids not reading. I was lucky that I read a lot, and my kids read a lot. But they needed something quality to read. So like when the Harry Potter series came out, and my wife read all those books to the kids and got them programmed on that. What do you see going on out there in terms of kids reading?
Kids love to read. And if you come into the library and you sit anywhere where you can see the children's section, especially the birth to 5 area, those kids just devour books. What we find is as they get older, there are a lot of other distractions. They get to be 9, they get to be 12, they get to be 15, and all of a sudden there's video games and there's sports and there's pull on them from the schools have all these other things they need to do, and the parents want them to be engaged in this, and reading sometimes falls by the wayside. And what we try and do is say, look, there's a lot of ways to read. You know, you can read a book, you can carry a book around with you and you can read it. You can carry a tablet around with you and read that way. But engaging with the written word is a skill that's really important for our population, especially now that everything's on the internet.
Right.
You know, quote unquote, everything's on the internet. When you go onto the internet and you look for information, you're still reading. And if you don't have those reading comprehension skills that you and I kind of got by nature just by reading so much, you begin to not be able to differentiate between what's good information and what's bad information.
Right.
And that's a real problem we're finding. Kids go online, they Google stuff, they take the first website they find,
right,
and they plop it into their report, and then the teacher says, this isn't good information.
Right.
They don't have those skills to vet.
The teacher's reading the same Wikipedia sentence.
Precisely. That's exactly what it is. And it's poorly written, the grammar's wrong,
yeah,
you know. And I mean, Wikipedia is a very handy cultural encyclopedia.
Yeah.
But it's not academic. It's not.
No, I love it when you log in.
You know,
at the top, this site has problems. This page has all kinds of issues, and like with anything, when you read a newspaper or anything, the more you know about something, the more flaws you find in what you're reading, the more inaccuracies, and it certainly is that way with anything online.
Yeah. It is. But and even more key is if people go online and they're looking for news, okay, and this is your bailiwick, this is your thing, they're going to get a dozen, 24 websites that want to give news on the peninsula about Delmarva. And they're going to need those skills to be able to decide which one are real news sites,
right,
and which ones are just people who are saying what they want to say,
right,
or who are trying to sell something, or who are just saying things just to say things.
Right.
There's news and then there's news, and there's several news sites, and then there's several that are commercial sites where people are they're on there as news sites, but they really want to rent you a hotel in Ocean City,
right,
or have you buy a house in Rehoboth, or
yeah.
So being able to vet those sites and being able to say that that's a good site, that's not a good site,
Yeah.
is a skill kids need.
Well,
And
I
they have
was
to read
always
to do it.
trained to cite the source. So like whatever information you wanted to, to give someone, you would give. It's like, so I read in the paper that XYZ did XYZ, and people go, oh, really? They would take it one way. But then you go, well, I heard at the barber shop, something else. So where you heard it affects the accuracy, perhaps, of the information.
Absolutely.
Or just who might be spinning it or anything else like that. But when you read it in a book, it's usually right.
It is, but there's more and more self-published books now.
There's that, yeah.
And so you have to go back and say, who's the self-publisher, who's the author? Does the author have credentials?
Yeah.
Do they really know what they're talking about? Or are they just making this up so they can sell books? So we call it information literacy. It's a skill that helps you decide whether or not it's good information.
Yeah.
And it's getting harder and harder to do because there are so many self-published people. They publish themselves on the website, they publish their own books, whatever. I'm sure that's something that the news, industry really struggles with. Am I talking to a real expert, or is this someone who just says, I know what I'm doing?
You try to quote people who are in a position to know.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
even people you would think that would be in a position to, you can interview the wrong police officer about a crime, and he can give you the wrong information because he's a police officer. You think he would know, but he might not be involved in that case. You've got to make sure you ask the right people.
That's exactly right.
Which is why I like talking to librarians about books.
Well, I've often said librarians don't have all the answers, but we know where to find them.
Exactly. You know how to look it up.
We know how to look it up. And that's the skill that we bring to the community, is to say, well, I don't know the answer to your question, but you and I will work together and we will find the right answer.
That's one of my journalism job interview answers. Are you a good speller? No, but I know how to use a dictionary.
There you go. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And never trust spell check, because it'll put a different word in there completely.
How can people reach you if they want to give you some input on the library?
Well, they can go to the library website, which is wicomico.library.org. My contact information is there. They can call the library. I'm sure you'll put the number up on the screen.
We'll do that.
And just ask to speak to the executive director. They'll put you through. It's not a problem. They can find me usually at the library or at one of the community events where we're at. I try and make myself as accessible as possible. Or they can post a comment on our Facebook page, and they always reach me as well.
Excellent. Andrea Berstler, one of those people making our community a better place right here. I appreciate you being here. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Greg Bassett from Salisbury Independent. Oh, and by the way, Andrea's got a big Q&A in our paper, so pick up the paper to read. Lots of stuff that we didn't talk about here. Amazing interview in this Q&A with Andrea, so thank you for that too. Greg Bassett from Salisbury Independent newspaper right here on 101 on PAC 14.